In this section, we want to talk about believing. And I can remember years ago, my first ever teaching job was that I had to teach Introduction to Christian Doctrine to 18-year-olds at a college, and it was a required class. Everybody had to take it in order to graduate. It was a small Christian college. And so I've been thinking about how do you teach belief for a very long time, and how to make it energizing and exciting. And one of the things that those 18-year-olds taught me when I was beginning my teaching career was that they were not very interested in questions of, tell me what I'm supposed to think in order to go to heaven, or tell me what I'm supposed to think in order to get it right. And they weren't even really interested in, tell me what I'm supposed to think in order to pass the test. What those 18-year-olds in the first classrooms I had in Introduction to Christian Doctrine cared about were, tell me a pathway, tell me a set of beliefs that will change my life. That's what they really cared about. And I can remember standing in classroom with them, grappling with everything from the Trinity to sacramental theology to the idea of salvation. And if it didn't make their lives different, they really didn't care. But when it did make their lives different, then the classroom became like magic. And it was those classrooms, those early classrooms, that taught me something important about belief, taught me something even very important about the word doctrine, which is a word that lots of people are very scared about in the 21st century, is that the root word for doctrine is the same root word for doctor. And the intention of the word doctrine, which came into the English language, I don't believe it was until like the 15th or so century, was that a doctrine was a healing teaching. And when I hear that in relationship to belief, or I hear that in relationship to Christian theology, all of a sudden it opens up the possibility of belief or the creeds very differently for me. Is that these are not simply ideas or opinions about God that Christians are supposed to memorize in order to get a hall pass into being good people, or the get out of jail free card to go to heaven. But that these teachings, these ideas, these beliefs are intended to be vehicles of healing, of wholeness, and of restoration. So at its core, the idea of Christian belief is not a test, but instead the idea of Christian belief is an experience. It is supposed to enter into us these beliefs, these passionate ideas that we hold of God, that we pass down through generations in the church, that are enshrined in the beautiful poetry of our hymns, that are explained in creeds and all of the books that we read in theology. That all of these things are supposed to enter into us. They are supposed to enter into community. And they are supposed to be an experience of God. Now, people don't stop to think about that very often. There's often, I think, in some Christian circles, a sort of a tension between the intellect and experience. But I don't think that is healthy for the church, and I think it's a false dichotomy. As I think that the life of the mind and the life of experience, the life of the heart, are really a complete thing. They are all part of human wholeness. And a huge problem in especially mainline and Protestant circles in the last 100 or 200 years has been a division between the heart and the head. And in that regard, it's often that mainline churches, or churches with educated clergy, like our denomination, the Episcopal Church, has really taken pride in how well we think about things. And we have had a tendency often to live up here in our heads, and that doesn't always sink down into our hearts. And indeed, part of the great division in American Protestantism, and please, anybody who out there understands Episcopalians as being Catholics, bear with me for a second. I don't mean I don't mean that we're all Protestants in the sense that you might be thinking, but certainly as in American religion, there's been this tension between those who are sort of in the mainline, the Protestant tradition, who emphasize the head, and the evangelicals and the fundamentalists and the Pentecostals who emphasize the heart. And that's often been that distance between those two kinds of traditions. Indeed, I sometimes like to say that American religion has often been a tension between intellect on ice and ignorance on fire. And that's no good for any of us. So when we think about belief, instead of thinking about belief just as a matter of what goes on in one's mind, this chapter invites people to think about belief as a matter of wholeness, as a way of actually integrating the mind and the heart, and offering a path that could even be a conversational and healing path between mainliners, between well-educated Protestants, between those Catholics who have a real passion for the life of the mind, between those folks and evangelicals, to sort of find a new commonality around this idea of experiential belief. When I talk about experiential belief, I am dreaming of a world where both experience informs ideas about God. So we enter into ideas about God through our hearts. But I'm also dreaming about the importance of a world where reason becomes a new passion. And that is something I think is really important in the early 21st century, is that we have really lost a sense of reason as an animating aspect of the human heart. And so I write, I don't even remember how many pages it takes up, but I remember when I was writing the book, I got very excited about the idea of reason as passion. And part of the thing that reminded me of that was to think back into the Enlightenment when people first started talking about reason. And certainly in the Episcopal Church, there was a great emphasis on a reasonable faith. And I know for absolute certainty, because my dissertation was on the history of Episcopalianism and I did research in the Diocese of North Carolina, I know that was a very important part of this diocese's early history. And so we often thought of ourselves as reasonable, as over and against those enthusiasts who were the Methodists and the Baptists and the people who were involved in the First Great Awakening. But in the 18th century, reason was something to get enthusiastic about. And that is, reason was often considered to be a pathway to personal transformation. And we have really countless numbers of journals and testimonies written from the 18th century, where especially women would write about how their lives were changed by an encounter with words. And it was through the use of their intellect that they came to new understandings about God, their world, and neighbors. And reason was so powerful that people talked about reason as being crowned by the angels, or reason was really almost elevated to the status of being a god in the 18th century, because people understood that reason was not just something that happened in your head, but that reason well applied was something that could change your life and could change the world around you. And so reason itself was an experience. So I wonder if we can get there again, understanding experience as a pathway toward belief and reason as a pathway back to our hearts? Can we put those pieces together? And is that the path of awakening for the 21st century? I think it might be.